got a couple folks in with us now, more than the 5 that I was counting on. So we're already winning. Thanks, guys. I think a lot of us know each other from MABA, which is the Mexican American Bar Association, that some of us have been involved in at different stages or levels. But if you don't know us from MABA, or you know us from work or our friends, I think I even had some friends from college that were trying to get on. That's pretty cool. So welcome. This is CHISME. It's a virtual call to action. I'll kind of give you guys a roadmap of what I plan to do over the next 20 minutes or so, because the real action part is actually going to happen when I stop talking and when you do. So, as you all are aware, I think, of the story of the disappearance and murder of Vanessa Guillen, who was a active duty soldier in the U.S. Army stationed at Fort Hood. And as that news was rolling out, me and some of my friends and colleagues here, Alex, Angie, Christy, Cass Hernandez, Susie Reyes, were like, what can we do? There's just kind of this anger and hurt, and where can we put it? So that was last week, and in the last few days, I kind of put CHISME together, and the idea is that we could come together, kind of hit some different points of advocacy, and then I'd send everybody out to reach out into their own communities of family and friends with 3 main goals. The first being to demanding accountability for the investigation around Vanessa's disappearance and murder. The second being making sure that our people are counted, and that's by taking the census. And the third, making sure that if they're eligible to, they're getting out to vote. I'm going to share my screen really briefly with you guys, and then I'll cut it back off for a second and kick it over to Alex to explain a little bit about Vanessa Guillen in just a moment. All right, can you guys see a PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, wish I had something more dynamic for you all, because I'm sure we're all really tired of Zoom meetings and PowerPoints, but this is the best I could do. So again, this is a call to action to spread awareness and increase engagement among our Latinx family members. I'm asking you each to choose 3 friends or family members, give them a call, and encourage and assist them to demand accountability, get counted in the census, and vote. Get a copy of our field guide with some helpful links and tips. And by our field guide, I mean the thing I just put together as quickly as I could with some help from some folks. And I'll get that link out to you guys shortly. And then find 3 más. Encourage each of the people that you reach out to find 3 more people to do the same. Basically, I'm taking the concept of a multi-level marketing scam and putting it towards a good cause. And I think that's how we grow, can grow that tree. So the first thing we're going to talk about is demanding accountability for Vanessa Guillen. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and have Alex talk to you guys a little bit about that.
Cool. Thanks.
Or I'm going to try to stop sharing. Go ahead, Alex.
All right. I don't know who's all on here, but in case I don't know you, my name is Alex. I currently work at the Dallas County District Attorney's Office. I've been there for almost 7 years, and I've been in a lot of different divisions. A division that I spent a lot of time in 2 years was the sexual assault division. So I handled all the rape cases for adult victims. The first year I did were cold cases, so they were untested rape kits. The second year, I guess, consisted more of the current cases in Dallas County. So I have a lot of experience, both in kind of my career and unfortunately personally as well, just dealing with sexual harassment and kind of the effects that it can happen. So whenever this story kind of came out, it hit really close to home. And I think that a lot of women in professional careers do probably have similar stories of some form of sexual harassment, and they don't say anything because there's nothing in place where we can be outspoken and feel protected at the same time. There are probably endless repercussions of speaking out. One thing that I chose not to speak out was just because I'd worked really hard for my career, and outing this person would have ruined it. And I had to choose my career, my reputation, my hard work. And that's what I, personally decided. I don't think there's any right or wrong thing. But I think the fact that people are put into these situations and they feel like they can't do anything, and you see Vanessa's story, I think it's really difficult because I don't even think the system was even put in place to protect her. And it's clear. I mean, she ended up being murdered. And so what I wanted to do was just let you guys know kind of a timeline that I had put together. It's really brief, but I just wanted to emphasize this timeline because there's going to be a certain point in which Vanessa's family starts creating the hashtag. They start creating the media profiles, the social media profiles, and you're going to see a much more rapid turn of events when it comes to the investigation. And so the reason I say that is because I think it's so important that we do find our own way, whether it's through social media, our friends or our family, to just keep posting about the story until the family gets as much of the truth as they deserve, and anyone else who might have been involved is held accountable. So we know now that Vanessa was murdered on April 22nd. Now her family reported her missing to the U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Division April 23rd, so the day after. There was some investigation done, kind of before social media took over. April 28th, there was a search of the victim's cell phone records, and they did show that the last person she was in contact with was suspect Aaron Robinson, who later committed suicide. Now, investigators did speak with him in late April, and he claimed he had an alibi. Who's the other suspect? Suspect Aguilar. May 18th, so roughly just a little less than a month later, they did talk to some witnesses who had seen Robinson take out a large box that appeared very heavy in weight that night on April 22nd. May 19th, suspect Robinson did consent to a search of his cell phone records. Again, these are only, I'm not saying there's not anything else to the investigation. This is just what's been made for public record. So we're about a month into a disappearance, and there's conversations had, there's search of cell phone records, but there isn't much anything else. By June 3rd, Vanessa's family is now posting on social media. They've created the hashtags, they've created all the social media accounts. So then about 3 days later, the Army offers a reward. So then they start incentivizing. Then June 18th, they did initiate a sexual harassment investigation. June 19th, the female suspect Aguilar is interviewed. And she gives some information that does lead them to the area where the body is later found. They detected an odor of decomposition, but no remains were found at that time. By June 23rd, Army officials are convinced that foul play was involved. By June 30th, the partial human remains were found. Same day, June 30th, is when suspect Aguilar did speak with investigators about the death and gave all the details. July 1st, Aaron Robinson committed suicide. Same day, suspect Aguilar was arrested. I will say by July 6th is when they had confirmed the remains of Vanessa that they had found near the Leon River. It's interesting just because I think when I look at this, especially from a criminal justice background, that the same individuals were spoken to several times. They even went out to the location and didn't find a body, but they knew that there were, signs of decomposition there. Whether it's cause or correlation, I don't think any of us can say what it was that really pushed them to find more answers or to push. But they had information there from the get-go before social media even really took over. And I think they might have found that Robinson was a person of interest or that they wanted to. Now, whether or not they were going to push further into it, whether or not they were going to be as transparent about it, I don't think so. I think the fact that people got involved, that celebrities got involved, allows us to know even the information that we know now. I will say I know that Elissa kind of went through some of the things that she suggested that we do to be outspoken about this. We do have 87 members of Congress who did write a letter asking for there to be a congressional investigation. That's with the Department of Defense, which we need to encourage that. So whenever you post about it, whenever you call anybody, whenever you decided to call or email your representative, make sure and push that. That's going to probably be the best form of an investigation to happen in what's going on. I will say I did work with my office as a legislative liaison, and it's not to downplay the letter that these Congress women and men have signed and written, but that's what they do all the time. And so from one congressperson to another, those letters may not mean much. But I've been down in Austin, I've been in those offices. It's when you get calls and emails and letters from your constituents where they're starting to pay attention, where they're like, oh crap, okay, now I really, we need to provide answers for people because we keep getting calls about something. So I know it sounds silly, but they're gonna just take your name, your information, you live in their district, and you just let them know, this is what you want. Those all get logged, those all get cataloged, whether it's an email, a message, a phone call. So, just put a reminder on your phone every week, every 2 weeks, whatever it is, to kind of notify whoever your elected officials are, until we can probably see some progress with that independent investigation.
Thank you so much, Alex. And I was a little bit rushed because I didn't realize that folks needed a password to get into this meeting. And so in my haste, I actually forgot to pump my girl up. Y'all, Alex is a badass. I'm just going to come out and say it. Her career speaks for itself. And so I'm really lucky and excited, Alex, that you could join us and share the information that you've put together for us. I'm going to share my screen again. All right. Okay, and so here we're going to be talking about specifically who we want to contact to demand accountability for Vanessa, and how to do that. And guys, I did put in the chat the link to the field guide, which is going to be the PDF version of what's being presented, and it has all the links in the text that you need ready to go when you guys make your phone calls to, your tia, your comadre, whoever. So here we go. Who are we going to call and write to? All right, we've identified basically three groups or people to target. The first is the U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee. There's the contact information there. You can either call, email, or hey, why not both? The second is the House Armed Services Committee with the same information there. And then lastly is the Department of Defense Inspector General. And I think Alex had actually mentioned that something like 80 plus congresswomen wrote a letter. The one that was written by Kristen Gillibrand and then supported by, oh man, I'm gonna lose her name right now, but she's a representative, I believe is Sylvia Garcia, does that sound right?
Sylvia Garcia, yeah.
Yep, Sylvia Garcia out of Houston, who was being sort of the conduit for the family up to this point, in addition to their attorney, addressing the Inspector General specifically, who I think kind of serves as like the AG for the Department of Defense to launch their own investigation. And so what we're seeing is the members from these Senate and House committees coming forward and telling the Inspector General, you need to take a look at this. So there's the contact information for that. Here I've broken out what to say or write. And the purpose or the idea behind this text is for it to be really simple and really easy for anybody that we're encouraging to take this action to take. And then my pro tip there is if you are a service member or a veteran, let them know, lean on that big time. So just like Alex brought up, going to your rep directly because you're their constituent, they care about their constituent. If you're a service member or a veteran, let them know. That's super important. And lastly, what to tweet, because the Department of Defense Inspector General doesn't have an email, just a snail mail address. And so hop on Twitter, tweet at them, call them out, also call the US Army out, but there's the text that you can use for that. And obviously the hashtag Justice for Vanessa Guillen has been going around quite a bit. And that one's something really easy that anybody can do from their phone. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is the 2020 census. And I'm going to go through that really quickly. But the big things here is why it matters. I think I knew some of this information, but not all of it. So the results determine political power, representation in Congress, funding for schools, infrastructure, and social services for the next 10 years. Which is feeling like not as much now. Like I feel like it's been 10 years since March. but 10 years is a long time and a lot can happen. Pro tip, Latinos are super undercounted in the census. And so while it's showing that we're this growing minority that's creeping into a majority, the truth is we might already be there if we were counted more accurately. These are some of the things that you might want to be able to bring up. For example, the government isn't the only entity that uses the census. It's used by residents, businesses, local governments, real estate developers, et cetera, to address those different issues. I think that's important to bring up. You might have somebody that feels like they're not super attached to politics, or they don't really get the point of talking about government and participating, but they're really passionate about the kids they have in school. So being able to point them to, look, you need to count yourself for the census so that your kid can go to a great school and have good programming, might be a way to convince a reluctant family member that's not as interested, because your CHISME turned out to be a ploy to get involved in government and politics. How to take the census, we've got the link for you. This one's really great because you can actually, if you're talking to a family member or friend that's not as tech savvy or doesn't have access to a computer, you can actually fill out the information for them while you've got them on the phone. You only need one person in each household to complete it for everybody, and there is no citizenship question. I'm sure many of us remember the heavy litigation around that, but just to remind everybody, no citizenship question, which then kind of goes to, well, if I'm not a citizen, should I be counted? Absolutely. It doesn't matter what that person's status is here. The point is getting basically counting bodies on the block. We want to know how many people are in each community. And then I've got next to that an example of the kinds of questions to expect, that they're pretty straightforward. I think in total, if you've got a household of 4, it should take you less than 10 minutes to complete. And now I'm going to turn off my screen sharing, and this is going to be the third part of our call to action here. And actually, Mr. Cedillo, if you would please, for those of you who don't know, Eric Cedillo is a local attorney. He's also just a local awesome hero. I don't know. He's been my man crush Monday at least once. I've never told him that. But also he's the leader of LVEC and SVEC, which is the Latino Voter Empowerment Coalition and the Student Voter Empowerment Coalition here in Dallas. So Eric, if you could just tell us a little bit about how to help getting people engaged in getting registered to vote, some common questions among Latinos when we're having that conversation. I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Elissa. You know, honestly, as we all know, you know, just kind of demographically, Latinos we don't vote in the same numbers as other groups. I think for a variety of reasons. I think the biggest one, though, of course, is our age. You know, we have an average age of 27 across the board. Average Anglo is 43, 44 years of age. And if you look at the numbers in terms of who's voting, it's older people vote. You know, when you get up to 65 and over, you're talking about a 95%, you know, voting rate among those individuals. So I think more than anything else, you know, the way in which, of course, we've come to this country, some of the, you know, newly arrived folks have, a lot of us can be concerned or scared with government, becoming part of government. It's kind of passed on generationally. It takes a little while to break that cycle, and it takes something from outside, I think, long. You know, my grandparents who've been here for, you know, a few generations were still, you know, concerned about voting and being a part of the process. And there's very real, you know, a reality that they were, of course, discriminated against, very much like the African-American community. They were subject to poll taxes in the same ways. They were, you know, subject to intimidation, things of that nature. It's continuous. So it's something that we, of course, have to break the cycle with. When we actually started with March to the Polls, which is an organization that initially LULAC was going into the schools in DISD, and we were registering seniors to vote. We kind of passed that mantle from LULAC on to March to the Polls, and we started going in and talking to the kids, getting all the seniors registered to vote. And luckily, over the last 4 or 5 years since we've taken over, got about 25,000 seniors, you know, registered to vote. That has been lacking. You know, that we had lost that sense of getting our students to the polls, getting them registered and engaging, even though we have a, you know, Texas law, Texas mandate that requires that principals do this in their schools. It wasn't happening. So I think that's the first prong. You know, the youth, of course, we've got to start approaching the youth. We've got to make it a common practice, part of our culture, that this is what voting is all about. can't tell you how many times we've talked to young Latinos, and their biggest, thing is that, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if we go out and vote. My vote doesn't matter as much as, this or that, or it doesn't matter because look who's running. What we have to do is get beyond that. And of course, we certainly want individuals who look like us running for office. We don't always have that, but when we do, we can start modeling, after that, people can start seeing themselves. We have a tremendous amount of power economically. Marketers, we're talking about marketing earlier, marketers understand that. They're starting to realize that a bit more, but we're not being represented on television. We are not the actors that are, being portrayed. We are not the, presidential candidates on TV. We need to start taking a stand against these. And I think those are the things that young people see and model after, and that's where to make the approach. Locally, regionally, we certainly need to start focusing on DFW. We just, percent of our DISD is Latino. You'll see that number at 50% or above throughout this area. State of Texas, we're at 51% in public schools. I think that's a really right place for us to be educating, utilizing the law, which mandates that seniors get registered to vote, utilizing that across the board. Luckily in DISD, I think we're doing a really good job. LVEC, March to the Polls, and SVIC have really gotten into some other independent school districts locally around this area, and we've been invited in to do the very same thing, which I think is a very good thing. Biggest issue with respect to that is the people who come in and volunteer. We don't have a whole lot of young Latinos going in and talking to these kids, and I think that's critically important too. With March to the Polls, we do have some older white folks who kind of come out and do that, and they're the ones who have the time, to be off work and go into the schools and do that, but we need to get beyond that. I know it's hard for us. It's hard for us to take off work and go show up at a school and spend 4 hours engaging with students about voting, the importance of voting. But we need to start doing that. We need to start finding people who can make that happen. So I would encourage you guys to kind of consider it. Of course, with the pandemic, everything's changed. We've rewritten the book in terms of how we're approaching this, and we're having to do things virtually, things of that nature. So that's changed a bit. But it certainly can be. Things like this are wonderful. Elissa, thank you so much for putting this together. I think this is just a great opportunity for us to have a discourse, learn from each other, mistakes that we make and all the other stuff. Sinbad's been a part of LVIC for since the beginning, and I really appreciate his efforts. He's always trying to hang on and push and really push me to do things right. So those are just these things need to be happening in so many different areas, and I think a lot of it is. But we need to be continuous in our efforts and continue to grow this and make it happen more often. That's my 2 cents. Sinbad, you want to say a couple of things real quick about LVEC specifically? 2 minutes, Sinbad.
Hey, Eric, really quickly. Thank you so much, Sinbad. Before you get started, let me just say thank you to Eric and Sinbad for showing up. This is how much of the real deal they are. I emailed them and Facebook messaged them this morning, and Eric said, I think I can make it, and he always comes through. So thank you so much for giving us time on such short notice. It's valuable info. Sinbad, share some knowledge, man.
Just, real quick, it's utilizing, social media, especially during the pandemic. The rise of social activism, even before the pandemic with Black Lives Matter, and Latinos need to really start taking cues from the Black Lives Matter movement. Also, unexpectedly is this new movement on social media with the K-pop stands or fans, with what they did with Trump's first rally after COVID started. This very political young demographic of Korean Americans, Koreans, young Latinas who gravitate towards, groups like BTS and other K-pop bands, really taking to social media and using that platform and those platforms, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter especially, which was a little bit shocking because the trend in the research had showed that the young demographics were moving from Twitter and Facebook to Instagram. And it appears that that's not the case. It appears that the younger demographic is really utilizing Twitter along with TikTok and Instagram to really get their messages out. And I think Latinos, we have to do the same thing. In regards to Vanessa, it's not just, you know, sending the messages to the Department of Defense, because just my personal opinion, 5,000 people, just general voters that message those people and they send that message, I know it carries a little bit of weight, but when somebody like Ted Cruz or John Cornyn or our Texas state representatives like the Mexican American caucus that, you know, sent out the letter demanding an investigation also, when we start applying pressure to those individuals and they start making Department of Defense, it's a little bit more weight, and it causes them to move a little bit faster, or at least, you know, give the appearance that they're moving faster. I mean, there's not a whole lot of trust coming from Latinos to, you know, they say that they're going to investigate something, and that comes from personal, you know, experiences that we've gone through. Eric, you know, knows that as well, that, you know, in school, when something would happen to us and the school said, tell our parents, well, we're investigating it, and then nothing ever happens, or we're never told that whatever caused the incident or the people involved were ever reprimanded or received any type of consequence. So we have a hard time believing when people say, hey, we're investigating this or this is going to happen. So I think that we not only need to call the Department of Defense, but we need to put pressure on these elected officials that they need to put pressure on the Department of Defense to also do that as well. And that's going, you know, through tagging them on social media posts, and, you know, especially with the pandemic, you know, Zoom meetings and social media. It's the new way to be an activist. You know, I didn't show up at any of the vigils for Vanessa because I'm at a high risk of catching COVID, so I can't put myself in that position.
Yeah.
So what I've done is just take it upon myself to go in locations by myself, sign for Vanessa, and, you know, just you know, but I've also got to look at, I got to protect myself that way. But I know just doing social media isn't going to get the job done. When they see people gathered and they see people marching, that's what really carries the power. But, you know, with the pandemic, you know, it's not bad with the social media is not a bad option.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing too, right, is it's an access thing. So if you've got older folks, at-risk folks, you know, it's just way easier to be a keyboard warrior. And while that's usually a knock, I actually think that's something that we can really take up in this moment. So the last thing I'm going to talk to everybody about is the third call to action, and that's voting. All right. So who can vote, right? Just a quick review from civics or your 9th grade government class. Got to be a U.S. citizen, got to be 18 years old on or before, 18 years old or older on or before election day, and you've got to be registered to vote. In terms of criminal history, the easy way to remember that is you've got to be off paper. So in Texas, all right, this is just the rule for Texas, it depends on the state, a convicted felon regains the right to vote when they have completed his or her sentence. That means if you paroled out of prison, but you're still on paper, you still got to call a parole officer, you can't vote. If you're on probation and you've been convicted, can't vote. But once you're off paper, either of those things is over with, you regain the right to vote, and what that person would need to do is then register. Pro tip, early voting ends tomorrow in Texas for the Dem primary. We have open primaries here, so you don't have to be a registered Democrat if you were going to vote. There's some big races. Railroad Commissioner is one of them. The Senate's one of them. You've got Royce West and MJ Hagar in that. And then some contested House seats around town, and also some benches in the criminal courthouse. So if you do not make it tomorrow, the early voting day is the 14th, but probably better to make it tomorrow. And I think I've heard mostly good reports from folks that have gone out to vote in terms of access, safety around COVID, and things like that. All right, how to vote. First, you got to be registered. I've included a link here to check voter registration. Again, while you're on the phone with your friend or family member tonight, you can do this for them. If they're not registered, but they are eligible to vote, there's the link to do that. And I've also included a link for how to look up a sample ballot. And I ran through it with a couple different addresses, not just mine. This site seems to be pretty legit, and it's good at catching the races. It also gives a good amount of background information for some of the candidates. Okay, so here, I won't go through all of these. I've included in the chat Google links to both this PowerPoint as well as what I'm calling the CHISME field guide that includes all of these links and information in it for your use. Please share it, get it out there. Here's links for voting in Texas. Some helpful, I think, Spanish vocabulary. This was prepared by Susie Reyes, who's a dear friend, another local attorney. I think she's working as a magistrate. She had to cover the jail tonight, but she helped prepare this list for me, so huge thanks to her. We've got some vocabulary related to the census, as well as vocabulary related to voting. I wanted to share with you all really briefly, stop sharing my screen. Kind of on a more personal note, what prompted this. When I was looking at that picture that is now, I feel like, kind of iconic, right, of Vanessa in her army uniform, I almost had to stop myself from being like, I swear I went to her quinceañera. I felt like I was looking at a little cousin, a prima, or someone's little sister, or even myself. She just seems so young. And I think that those of us that either work around or work with violence against women and feminicide, or have experienced harassment in the workplace, or just are a breathing, living woman in this world, while we were holding out hope, we knew from the jump, the second we heard her sister say she'd complained about sexual harassment at work, that we weren't going to have a good outcome. And the fact that it took hiring an attorney, making it go viral on social media, having Salma Hayek come out of wherever she's been hanging out and throw money at it, that it took all that for y'all to develop the boyfriend / side piece as a suspect. What am I going to do with all of that anger and frustration at a system that, as a prosecutor, I kind of work in, you know, even though it's not the military system? And the answer is, I'm going to pick up the phone and talk shit. And that's CHISME. So I'm sending you guys all out. Pick your 3 friends or family members to use these call to actions on. Help some folks get counted in the census. Get some people registered to vote. I'm going to hang around in the Zoom call for a little while longer if anybody's got a question. I would love to hear how it goes, who you chose to talk to, what their responses were. Could you convince them to go and get Tres Mas? And I'd also, hey, if you guys enjoyed this, found it helpful, would like to see it again, let me know. I'd like to kind of turn it into a recurring thing. Thank you so much, Alex, Guillen, for your time and attention to this. Eric, that was incredible. Thank you all for showing up and participating. And in honor of the Netflix documentary about Walter, let me leave you with mucho, mucho, mucho amor. All right, that's CHISME, guys. Thanks so much.